The wedding hall was full of noise, laughter, and the clinking of expensive glasses. But the bride sitting at the head table felt as if she were sitting alone in an empty room. Elena Rossi kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes lowered, her spine straight. She had learned long ago that the safest place to be was invisible. Across from her sat her new husband, Dante Moretti, the head of one of the most feared crime families in the city. He was tall, sharp-featured, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that made grown men lower their eyes when he walked past. Tonight, he wore his confidence like armor, and he used it to humiliate the woman he had just married. "A toast," Dante said, raising his glass and smirking at the crowd of men loyal to him, "to peace between our families, bought and paid for with a bride nobody wanted." He looked at Elena, who did not flinch. "Lucky for her, I don't ask my wife to speak much. Silence suits her." Laughter rippled through the hall. Elena felt the heat crawl up her neck, but she said nothing. She had been raised to absorb insults the way a stone absorbs rain, letting it slide off without leaving a mark. Her father had arranged this marriage to settle an old debt between the Rossi and Moretti families, a debt that had cost lives on both sides for years. Elena's silence at the ceremony was not weakness. It was a choice, one that she had made a long time ago, though no one in that room knew the real reason why. She was moved into the Moretti estate the very next day. The house was enormous, filled with marble floors, oil paintings, and men with guns hidden beneath their jackets. Elena walked through it like a shadow, speaking only when spoken to, keeping her eyes on the floor, never drawing attention to herself. The staff whispered about her. The guards barely acknowledged her. Dante treated her as an afterthought, a piece of furniture that had come with the house. "She barely says a word," one of his men, Marco, said one evening as they sat in Dante's study. "You sure she's not simple in the head?" Dante swirled the drink in his glass and shrugged. "Doesn't matter what she is. She's here to keep the peace between our families. That's all I need from her." He did not know that Elena heard every word through the thin wall separating the study from the hallway. She did not react. She simply walked on, her expression calm, her heart carefully guarded. What none of them knew was that Elena's quiet nature had not come from timidity. It had come from training. Her mother, long believed to have died in a car accident when Elena was a child, had actually fled from a dangerous past, taking her daughter with her and hiding her true identity. Elena had grown up moving from town to town, taught from a young age to blend in, to never draw attention, to keep secrets locked so deep that even she sometimes forgot they were there. Her mother had told her, again and again, that silence could be the difference between safety and disaster. Elena had listened. She had become a master of quiet. Weeks passed in the Moretti household. Elena kept to herself, tending to small tasks, reading in the library when no one needed her, watching the world of danger and power swirl around her without ever stepping into it. Dante barely looked her way except at formal dinners, where he would occasionally throw a careless comment her direction, more out of habit than any real interest. Then, one night, everything changed. Dante had gone to meet with a rival family to discuss a shipment dispute, a routine negotiation that had gone wrong more times than anyone wanted to admit. This time, it went wrong in the worst possible way. Gunfire erupted in the meeting room. Dante was hit before his own men could pull him out, a bullet tearing through his side as chaos exploded around him. He was rushed to a private hospital that the Moretti family had used for years, a place known for discretion and silence, the kind of hospital where questions were not asked and records were kept far from the public eye. Marco burst through the front doors of the estate, his face pale, shouting for Elena. "He's been shot," Marco said, breathless. "It's bad. They need blood, and his type is rare. We're trying everyone in the family, but nobody's matching." Elena did not scream. She did not cry. She simply nodded once and said, "Take me to him." The car ride to the hospital felt like it lasted forever, though it was only minutes. When Elena arrived, the hallway outside the operating room was filled with tension so thick it felt like it could be cut with a knife. Men who feared nothing on the streets paced back and forth, fear written plainly across their faces. Dante's second-in-command, an older man named Salvatore, looked up as Elena entered. "They need a transfusion," he said quickly. His blood type is 1 in 100,000. We've called every contact we have, and still nothing. If they don't find a match soon, test me, Elena said quietly. Salvatore blinked. You? Test me, she repeated, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. A nurse led her into a side room without hesitation, given the urgency of the situation. They drew her blood quickly, the needle sliding into her arm as she stared calmly at the wall, her mind far away in a childhood memory of her mother, whispering that some truths are buried for a reason. She did not know why she felt so certain in that moment. She only knew that she had to try. Minutes later, a doctor rushed back into the waiting area, holding a chart, his expression unreadable. It's a match, he said. A perfect match. Relief crashed through the room, but there was something else in the doctor's eyes, something careful and puzzled that Salvatore noticed immediately. What is it? Salvatore asked. Is something wrong with her blood? The doctor hesitated. No, nothing is wrong. It's just unusual. We ran the standard panel required before any transfusion, and there's a genetic marker in her blood that we don't see very often. It's tied to a very specific bloodline. I only recognize it because I once worked on a case years ago involving the Moretti family history before Mr. Moretti's father passed. This marker was documented in old family medical records. It's incredibly rare outside of direct Moretti descendants. Salvatore's face went white. That's not possible. She's a Rossi. I'm only telling you what the test shows, the doctor said. Whoever she is, she shares a bloodline with your boss somewhere far back. It's faint, but it's there. It's not something that could be faked. Elena, sitting quietly on the hospital bed with a small bandage on her arm, said nothing. Her expression did not change, but inside, something old and long buried stirred awake. She thought of her mother's warnings, of the vague half-answers she had given whenever Elena asked about her father's side of the family. She thought of the nights her mother would stare out windows, as if watching for someone who might be following them. Pieces that had never made sense before began, slowly, to click into place. The transfusion went smoothly. Dante survived the surgery, though the doctors said he had come dangerously close to losing too much blood before Elena arrived. When he woke up hours later, weak and pale, the first thing he saw was Elena, sitting in a chair beside his bed, her hands folded in her lap the same way they had been at their wedding dinner. You, he said, his voice hoarse. They told me. They said you saved my life. Elena met his eyes for the first time without lowering her gaze. I did what needed to be done. Dante studied her for a long moment, the arrogance that usually colored his expression, replaced by something rawer, something closer to shame. He remembered the words he had said at their wedding, the laughter of his men, the careless cruelty he had shown a woman who had done nothing to deserve it. Now that same woman had given her blood to keep him alive, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. Why? He asked quietly. After everything I said to you, why would you help me? Elena was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because it was the right thing to do. Not because of who you are to me, or what you said. Because a life was in danger, and I could help. Over the following days, as Dante recovered in the estate, the household buzzed with quiet whispers about the blood test, about the strange marker the doctor had found, about what it might mean. Salvatore, ever loyal and ever cautious, began quietly looking into old family records, determined to understand how a woman from the Rossi family could carry a marker tied to the Morettis. What he found, buried in yellowed documents and old letters kept in a locked cabinet in the family archive, confirmed what the doctor had suspected. Decades earlier, a daughter born into the Moretti family had been secretly given up, sent away to protect her from a violent feud that had claimed the lives of several relatives. The records were sparse, deliberately vague, clearly written by someone trying to protect a child from a dangerous legacy. The timeline matched. The bloodline matched. Elena's mother, it turned out, had not simply fled a troubled past. She had fled the Moretti family itself, taking her daughter to keep her safe from a war that had already taken so much. When Dante was finally strong enough to sit up and speak at length, he called Elena into his study, the same room where he had once dismissed her as unimportant. This time, the room felt different. He gestured for her to sit, something he had never done before. Salvatore found records, he said slowly, about a Moretti daughter who was given away, generations back, to protect her. He believes it connects to you, to your mother. Elena nodded, her expression calm but her eyes glistening with something that looked like the release of a lifetime spent bracing for the truth. My mother never told me exactly why we ran, she said. She only said that some families carry blood too dangerous to claim. I always thought she meant something abstract. I never imagined it meant this. Dante studied her, this woman he had mocked and dismissed, who had turned out to be tied to his own family in a way neither of them could have imagined. I owe you an apology, he said. Not just for what I said at the wedding, but for everything since. I treated you as though you meant nothing. You saved my life, and it turns out you may have more right to this family's legacy than most of the men who work for me. Elena shook her head gently. I don't want power, Dante. I never did. I only wanted to stop hiding. My whole life, I've been taught to disappear, to stay quiet, to never let anyone see who I really am. For the first time, someone knows the truth, and I'm still standing here. Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying the woman in front of him with new eyes. The arrogance that had once defined him had cracked open, revealing something more thoughtful underneath. Then let's stop hiding together, he said. Whatever this marriage started as, it doesn't have to stay that way. In the weeks that followed, the household began to change. Dante called a meeting with his men, standing before them in the same dining hall where he had once mocked his bride. This time, his words were different. I was wrong about my wife, he said plainly, his voice carrying through the silent room. She is not a consolation prize. She is not beneath this family. She saved my life without hesitation, and it turns out her blood is tied to ours in ways none of us understood. From this day forward, she will be treated with the respect she has always deserved. The men who had laughed at the wedding now looked at Elena with something closer to awe. She did not revel in the attention. She simply nodded once, the same calm nod she had given so many times before, and took her place beside her husband, not as an afterthought, but as an equal. Over time, the marriage that had begun as a cold arrangement slowly transformed into something neither of them had expected. Dante learned to value Elena's quiet strength, understanding now that her silence had never been weakness, but survival, patience, and quiet courage forged through years of hardship. Elena, for her part, found in Dante someone willing to change, someone humbled enough to admit when he had been wrong. She never sought power within the family, never asked for a title or a claim to the Moretti name beyond what was already hers by marriage. What she wanted, and what she finally found, was simple: a place where she no longer had to hide, and a partner who had learned to truly see her. The story of the blood test spread quietly through the family in the months that followed, told and retold, until it became something of a legend among the men who worked for Dante. They spoke of the quiet bride who had walked into a hospital without hesitation and given the one thing that saved their boss's life. They spoke of how a single test had uncovered a truth buried for generations, and how it had transformed a marriage of convenience into something built on genuine respect. Elena never needed the story told. She knew the truth of who she was, not because of the blood in her veins, but because of the strength she had carried through every silent year of her life. And for the first time, she did not have to carry it alone.